I don't know how did a bullet from your gun get out there?
I don't know, huh?
Because they said it came from our gun.
I know that's what they believe me, that's what they're telling me.
But how did it get there?
I don't know.
And they said there was one in your box above your dresser that matched it.
They showed me that picture too. I can't explain it. And I don't...
I can't either. They keep asking me and I don't know how to answer.
What if I told you that the last thing two teenage girls ever recorded wasn't a selfie, wasn't a song, but the face of their own killer? And what's even more chilling is that for over 5 years, that killer walked freely through the same small town, greeted neighbors, worked a normal job, went home to his wife every single night, all while carrying a secret so dark it would eventually consume him from the inside out. But here's the part that'll make your blood run cold. He almost got away with it. Not because he was clever, not because the evidence didn't exist, but because of a spelling mistake. One single clerical error that buried his name in a filing cabinet, while two families buried their daughters. Before we dive into one of the most haunting cases I've ever covered, I need you to do something for me. If you're someone who believes that justice, no matter how delayed, still matters, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like your neighbor. Sometimes it wears a jacket, just like yours. And sometimes it hides in plain sight for half a decade. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from, because this case shook an entire nation, and I want to know if it reached you too. February 13th, 2017, Delphi, Indiana. It was warmer than usual for a winter day, the kind of unexpected warmth that makes you want to get outside, stretch your legs, maybe take a walk on a trail you've walked 100 times before. For 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Liberty German, that's exactly what it was supposed to be. Just a walk. Just two best friends capturing moment on a phone, laughing at nothing in particular, living in that brief, beautiful window of life before adulthood steals your innocence. Libby held up her phone as they crossed the Monon High Bridge, an old, abandoned railway trestle that stretched high above a creek. The bridge was rotting in places, gaps between the wooden slats wide enough to see the ground far below. It wasn't the safest place to be, but it was their place, the kind of spot teenagers claim as their own. And that's when Libby's phone captured something. Not a landscape, not a pose, but a figure, a man, walking behind them. At first glance, it doesn't seem like much, just a grainy image of someone else enjoying the trail. But if you look closer, if you really look, you can feel it, the way he's walking, the way his hands are tucked into his pockets, the way he's focused, not on the scenery, on them, and then the audio starts. His voice, low, commanding, chillingly calm, down the hill. 3 words. That's all it took. 3 words that would echo through a community, through a nation, through the nightmares of 2 families for over 5 years. Abby and Libby never made it home that day. When their parents couldn't reach them, panic set in fast. Search parties were organized. Volunteers combed the woods. Flashlights cut through the darkness. And the next morning, February 14th, Valentine's Day, their bodies were found less than a mile from the bridge. They had been murdered, throat slashed, left in the cold. And between their bodies, investigators found something that would eventually crack this case wide open. A single unspent bullet, a .40 caliber round. It hadn't been fired, but it had been cycled through a gun. And that gun, that very specific gun, would lead them to a man who had been hiding in plain sight all along. If you're feeling that pit in your stomach right now, that sinking realization of where this is going, I need you to keep watching. Because what happens next is going to make you question how someone can live with themselves after doing something so unthinkable. And trust me, the answer is more disturbing than you think. Go ahead and hit that like button if you're still with me, because this story is only getting darker. The investigation into the murders of Abby Williams and Liberty German was unlike anything Delphi, Indiana had ever seen. This was a town of fewer than 3,000 people, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where crime is rare and tragedy even rarer. But now, 2 children were dead, and the entire community was paralyzed by fear and grief. Within days, investigators made the unprecedented decision to release the audio and video from Liberty's phone. The grainy footage of the man on the bridge, the chilling voice saying down the hill. It was broadcast on every major news network, shared millions of times online, analyzed frame by frame by armchair detectives across the country. Tips poured in by the thousands. Everyone thought they recognized him. Everyone had a theory. But despite all the attention, despite all the resources poured into the case, the killer remained a ghost. Years passed. The case grew cold. Families grieved in public while investigators worked in private, chasing leads that went nowhere, re-interviewing witnesses whose memories had faded. And all the while, the man in the video, the man with the haunting voice, remained unidentified. Until September 2022. That's when a volunteer named Kathy Shank was sorting through old case files, doing routine administrative work, the kind of tedious task that most people would zone out during. But Kathy wasn't most people. She noticed something, a tip that had been filed away years earlier, a tip about a man who had been on the trail that day, a man who had voluntarily come forward to say he was there. His name was Richard Allen. But here's the thing. Due to a clerical error, a misspelled last name, the tip had been marked as cleared and never properly investigated. Think about that for a moment. For over 5 years, Richard Allen's name had been sitting in a file cabinet, buried under a mountain of other tips, dismissed because of a typo, while families waited for answers, while a community lived in fear, while 2 graves were visited by parents who would never stop asking why. If that doesn't make you angry, I don't know what will. Drop a comment and let me know what you're thinking right now, because I can barely keep my composure talking about this. When investigators finally re-examined the tip, everything started to click into place. Not new evidence, old evidence, evidence that had been there all along, waiting for someone to connect the dots. The unspent bullet found between the girls' bodies, it matched a firearm registered to Richard Allen. A .40 caliber Sig Sauer pistol that he had owned since 2001. The car that a witness had seen parked near the trail that day. It matched a vehicle owned by Richard Allen, the man in the video, the man whose image had been seared into the public consciousness for over 5 years. Experts said it looked like Richard Allen. Same build, same clothing, same gait. Piece by piece, the puzzle that had haunted investigators for so long was finally coming together. And at the center of it all was a man who had been living in Delphi the entire time, working as a pharmacy technician at the local CVS, going home to his wife every night, living what appeared to be a completely normal life. On October 13th, 2022, Richard Allen was called in for questioning, not as a suspect, at least not officially, as a witness, someone who had been on the trail that day and might have seen something useful. But the detectives knew better. They had his car. They had his gun. They had the bullet. And they were about to see if the man sitting across from them could explain how all of that evidence pointed directly at him. If you're wondering how someone can sit across from detectives and lie about murdering 2 children, keep watching, because you're about to see exactly how it's done. Make sure you're subscribed, because cases like this are what we cover on this channel. Stories that need to be told, stories that demand justice. The interrogation room is a strange place, sterile, cold, designed to make you uncomfortable. And on October 13th, 2022, Richard Allen sat in one of those rooms, across from detectives who had spent over 5 years waiting for this moment. At first, Richard seemed calm, cooperative, even. When asked about February 13, 2017, he confirmed that yes, he had been on the Monon High Bridge trail that day. Yes, he had walked out onto the bridge. He remembered seeing 3 girls near the trailhead as he arrived. He thought maybe one of them was watching the other 2, like a babysitter. He remembered walking down the trail, walking back. Just a normal day, just a normal walk. But then the questions got more specific. What car was he driving that day? Richard hesitated. He wasn't sure. It could have been the black car. Or maybe the gray Ford 500. He and his wife had switched vehicles back and forth over the years. He couldn't quite remember which one he'd been driving on that particular day. Now, here's the thing about memory. We remember the important days. We remember the days that mattered. And February 13th, 2017, the day 2 local girls went missing and were later found murdered. That should have been seared into his memory. Everyone in Delphi remembered that day. Everyone remembered where they were, what they were doing, who they saw. But Richard Allen, a man who admitted to being on the trail that same day, couldn't remember which car he drove. That's what investigators call a red flag. And it was only the beginning. When asked if he saw anyone else on the trail, Richard's answer was vague. Maybe he saw someone on the bridge when he was walking back, but he didn't really notice. The only people he clearly remembered were those 3 girls near the trailhead. He was walking toward them. That detail. That small, seemingly innocent detail. Richard Allen, walking toward young girls on a trail. It suddenly felt heavy. Significant, because Libby and Abby had been on that trail, on that bridge, and someone had walked toward them. Someone had gotten close enough to be captured on video, close enough to give an order, close enough to force them down the hill. The detectives shifted gears. They wanted to look at Richard's phone. Phones don't lie. Phones don't forget. They track your location, your activity, your entire digital footprint. And if Richard had nothing to hide, his phone would confirm his story. But the moment they asked, something changed in Richard. The easy cooperation evaporated, replaced by defensiveness, by suspicion. I don't want to be somebody's fall guy, he said. Nobody had accused him of anything yet. But he was already talking about being framed, already suggesting that investigators might try to twist the evidence to fit a narrative. Why? Why would an innocent man, someone who voluntarily came forward as a witness 5 years earlier, suddenly be worried about being set up? If you're feeling uneasy right now, if something about Richard's behavior is making your skin crawl, leave a comment. Tell me what you're thinking, because this is where the mask starts to slip. When the detectives asked to search his house and his car, Richard shut down completely. If you want a warrant, get one, he said, but I'm not letting you go through my house. Again, why? If you're innocent, if you have nothing to hide, why wouldn't you do everything in your power to help solve the murder of 2 children? Why wouldn't you want to clear your name as quickly as possible? Unless, of course, you're not innocent. Unless there's something in that house, in that car, in that phone, that you desperately don't want them to find. And then Richard said something that, in hindsight, is absolutely chilling. You want closure for the families, but pieces get made to fit when people are desperate to solve a case. He was projecting, accusing the investigators of the very thing he had spent 5 years doing, manipulating the truth to protect himself. The detectives had heard enough. It was time to show their hand. The moment the detectives revealed the evidence, the entire interrogation shifted. This wasn't a conversation anymore. This was a confrontation. They started with the car. "We have a picture of your car at the trail that day," one detective said calmly. Richard blinked, paused, then nodded slowly. Okay, so they had his car. That wasn't a surprise. He'd already admitted to being there. But then they brought out the photo. The one taken from Liberty German's phone. The grainy image that had haunted the public for over 5 years. The man on the bridge. Jeans, jacket, hat, hands in pockets. Walking with purpose. "Is that you?" the detective asked. Richard stared at the image. And for the first time, you could see the wheels turning. Not confusion. Not shock. Calculation. "If it was taken with a girl's phone, that's absolutely not me," he said quickly. Too quickly. "I never met these girls. I've never seen them." But the detectives weren't buying it, because the man in the photo was wearing the exact same clothing Richard had just described himself wearing that day. Blue jeans, a Carhartt-style jacket, a hat, and then they dropped the bombshell. The bullet. "We found a .40 caliber round at the scene," the detective said, sliding a report across the table, "between the girls' bodies. And the extraction marks on that round? They match your gun." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Richard stared at the report. His jaw tightened. His hands clenched. And then, instead of asking how that was possible, instead of expressing shock or confusion, he said, "If it was taken with the girl's phone, there's no way it could be me." He wasn't denying the bullet. He was deflecting. redirecting, refusing to engage with the single most damning piece of evidence in the entire case. A bullet from his gun, lying next to a murder child. If you're feeling sick right now, you should be, because this is the moment when it became undeniable. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a killer, sitting across from detectives, realizing that the walls were finally closing in. The detective pressed harder. This round was collected on February 14th, 2017. It's been in evidence ever since. We've tested other guns. None of them match. But yours does. The extraction marks are like a fingerprint, unique to your gun and your gun only. Richard's response? Then it didn't come out of my gun. Not, I don't understand how this is possible. Not, there must be some mistake. Just flat denial, as if saying it enough times would make it true. The detective leaned forward. You're the last person to have contact with Abby and Libby. We have witnesses who saw you on the bridge. We have experts who say that you in the video. That's your voice saying down the hill. We have your car. We have your gun. We have the bullet. Help me understand, Rick. How did that bullet get there? Richard's face flushed. His voice rose. I didn't do this. I didn't kill anyone. You're not going to make me believe it's me. And then, in a moment of staggering arrogance, he said, Good luck finding anything that points in that direction. It was practically a challenge. The kind of line you hear from someone who thinks they're smarter than everyone else in the room. Someone who believes they've covered their tracks so well that no amount of evidence will ever be enough. But Richard Allen wasn't as smart as he thought, and the detectives weren't done. Not by a long shot. If you're still watching, if you need to know how this ends, stay with me. Because what happens next is going to break your heart and make you believe in justice all over again. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me how you're feeling right now. Because I know this is heavy. A week later, Richard Allen was brought back in. But this time, it wasn't a conversation. This time, he was under arrest. Search warrants had been executed. His house had been searched. His guns had been seized. And the evidence was no longer circumstantial. It was overwhelming. The detectives laid it out piece by piece. The bullet found at the scene matched his .6 Sauer .40 caliber pistol. Not just the same type of gun. His gun. The extraction marks were a perfect match. The car seen near the trail that day belonged to him. The man in the video, according to forensic experts, was him. The voice on the recording, analyzed by audio specialists, was him. And then there was his behavior, his refusal to cooperate, his evasiveness, his inability to provide a straight answer to simple questions. All of it pointed in one direction. But Richard still wouldn't break. He sat in that interrogation room, surrounded by evidence, and continued to deny everything. I didn't do this. You're not going to find anything that ties me to those murders. The detective, frustrated and exhausted, finally snapped. 2 children are dead, Rick, and you're sitting here playing games. You got one piece of evidence against you? No, we have multiple. And you know what? Your wife knows something's wrong, too. That got a reaction. Richard's face went pale. His hands trembled. What did you say to my wife? He demanded. The detective leaned back. She said you've been different since 2017. Depressed. Anxious. She said you wouldn't let her join the search parties when the girls went missing. She wanted to help, and you wouldn't let her. Why is that, Rick? Why would you keep your wife away from something the entire town was involved in? Richard's voice cracked. Because I didn't want her involved in this. I didn't want any of this. Any of what? The detective pressed. The investigation? Or the guilt? Richard didn't answer. He just sat there, staring at the table, his mind clearly racing. And then the detective played his final card. He brought in Richard's wife, Kathy. When she walked into the room, Richard's entire demeanor changed. The defiance melted away, replaced by desperation, by pleading. You know me, he said to her, his voice shaking. You know I didn't do this. You know I couldn't do something like this. Kathy looked at him, tears streaming down her face. Then how did a bullet from your gun get there? She asked. How, Rick? He had no answer. because there was no answer. At least not one he was willing to give. Not yet. The interrogation ended with Richard being led away in handcuffs, still maintaining his innocence, still insisting that the evidence was wrong, that he was being set up, that he would be vindicated. But the evidence didn't lie, and neither did the recordings that would surface later. You see, while Richard Allen sat in jail awaiting trial, he made dozens of phone calls to his wife and his mother, and those calls were recorded. And in those calls, the truth finally came out. "I did it," he told his wife one day, his voice barely above a whisper. "I killed Abby and Libby." His wife, in shock, tried to convince him he was confused, that the stress, the isolation, the medication he was on had messed with his mind. But Richard repeated it, over and over. "I did it. I killed them." To his mother, he said the same thing. "I wouldn't tell you I did it if I didn't." Those recordings were played in court, and when they were, there wasn't a dry eye in the room, because this wasn't just a confession. This was a man finally, after 5 years of hiding, of lying, of playing the victim, admitting to the world what he had done. He had taken 2 innocent girls, 2 best friends, and he had stolen their futures. For no reason that makes sense. For no reason that ever could. In November 2024, Richard Allen was convicted on all counts. 4 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 130 years in prison. He will die behind bars. And that is exactly where he belongs. But here's the thing. This case isn't just about Richard Allen. It's about Abby Williams and Liberty German. 2 girls who loved life, who loved each other, who, in their final moments, had the courage and the presence of mind to record their killer, to leave behind evidence that would eventually bring him to justice. Liberty's phone didn't just capture a crime. It captured the bravery of a 14-year-old girl who knew she was in danger and made sure her killer wouldn't get away. And because of that, because of her, 2 families finally have answers. A community finally has closure. And the man who thought he was untouchable is spending the rest of his life in a cell. If this case has moved you, if you believe that stories like this need to be told, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Because this channel is dedicated to giving a voice to the victims, to telling the stories that matter, to reminding the world that justice, even when it's delayed, is worth fighting for. Leave a comment and tell me your thoughts. Tell me what you felt watching this story unfold. Tell me where you're watching from and how this case impacted you. And if you learn anything from Abby and Libby's story, let it be this. Evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like someone you'd pass on the street, someone you'd never suspect. But no matter how well it hides, the truth always finds a way. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And thank you for making sure that Abby Williams and Liberty German are never forgotten.